Thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Alia Sumro, and I'm the Deputy Director for New York City Policy at the New York League of Conservation Voters. I'm here today with members of the New York City Coalition to End Lead Poisoning, a coalition of advocates, doctors, public health professionals, and lawyers who first came together in the 1980s to end lead poisoning in New York City, whether from paint, dust, or drinking water. NYCCELP advocated for the passage of Local Law 1 of 2004 to prevent childhood lead poisoning, and we have advocated for a citywide mandatory lead service line replacement program to address public health concerns about lead in drinking water. That leads me to why we're here today. NYCCELP is here to strongly voice our opposition to Intro 942 of 2024, a New York City Council bill nicknamed the Rotten Apple Bill that will be up for discussion at the New York City Council Committee on Environmental Protection hearing this morning. This bill would require property owners to take on the task of replacing all lead water service lines within the next 10 years, costing them thousands of dollars of out-of-pocket expenses and creating a patchwork of construction. And with that, our first speaker this morning is Josh Kleinberg, Senior Vice President at the New York League of Conservation Voters.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, New York League of Conservation Voters, we agree that all lead pipes in New York City should be removed over a 10-year period. However, we strongly oppose the approach presented in Intro 942, and we are urging the Council to withdraw this bill. Now, there's limited time today. There's so many reasons why we oppose the bill. I'll just keep the 2 points. Intro 942 leaves it to the private property owners to foot the $10,000 bill for the lead pipe replacement. This is cleaning up a mess, by the way, that was created by New York City, which allowed and even at times encouraged the usage of lead pipes up until 1961. Intro 942 places the burden of scheduling the lead pipe replacements onto the property owners, not the city. And so it would create a potential mess and chaos in our streets and unsafe work practices and logistical headaches for every community around the city. So allow me to share some DEP data from March of this year that kind of shows what I'm talking about citywide. So New York City has about 857,000 pipes around the city delivering drinking water. About 40% of those pipes, roughly 338,000 properties, are the ones we're talking about where a lead pipe is delivering water, and it could be lead or possible lead. But it's up to that many that we're talking about. It's a big problem. It equates to about 1 in 5 New Yorkers that could be drinking water from a pipe that's made of lead or possible lead. Here's just an example of a block in Queens of the logistical headaches and nightmare that I'm talking about here. On this one block, on both sides of the street, there's almost 50 properties that have a lead pipe confirmed. And that means each and every property owner is going to have to schedule that appointment. So every 2 to 3 months for 10 years, the same street could be ripped up for the same purpose. And adding insult to injury, every time there's disturbance in the street, a lead pipe can fail and can flake and deliver lead into neighboring drinking water sources. So for these reasons and many more that you'll hear from our colleagues, we strongly oppose Intro 942. This bill is so badly broken, it cannot be fixed, and like a lead pipe, it should be replaced with something that is more beneficial and helpful and just for our city. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Josh. We always love data. The next speaker is Marissa Lieberman-Klein, Associate Attorney at Earth Justice.
Hi everyone. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about why it's so important that we replace lead pipes in an ethical fashion. So lead exposure is dangerous even in really small amounts. It can decrease a child's cognitive capacity, cause behavioral problems, and limit their ability to concentrate, which can affect a child's ability to learn in school. Even low-level exposure can be responsible for nearly 10 times more adult deaths than we previously thought, causing about 400,000 deaths per year in the U.S. from cardiovascular disease. And EPA modeling has shown that 10 to 80% of U.S. children's lead exposures can come from lead in water, with the highest level coming for formula-fed infants, because when you mix the water with formula, they get really exposed to it. And this is an environmental justice issue. It affects Black and Latinx children, as well as low-wealth children, disproportionately more than white and higher-wealth children. So lead service lines are the biggest contributor to lead in drinking. This happens when the water runs through the pipe, and the movement of the water causes lead to leach from the pipe and into the water. So that's why it's so important that these lead pipes get out of the ground. And even though New York City, like all other large water systems, uses corrosion control treatments to reduce lead levels, and DEP says that those corrosion control treatments mean that there's no lead problem in New York City, even the best corrosion control treatments can't reduce lead levels to safe levels, because first, even minuscule amounts of lead could cause harm. And second, lead service lines are vulnerable to lead concentration fluctuations that corrosion control can't account for. So that's things like Josh was saying, when you dig up the street around the lead service line and disturb it, then you can get higher lead levels in the home when you test. A study in Chicago found that these kind of physical disturbances to lead service lines caused lead levels that were otherwise testing low to increase to values more than 4 times higher than the federal lead action. And lead particles from the service line can also flake into the water, and this causes a high variability in lead levels. And when you do one-time testing, you don't always see that full picture. So even though corrosion control is doing things, replacing the lead service lines is really the only way to ensure that lead exposure in drinking water is reduced. And federal regulations for decades failed to protect public health. The lead and copper rule was a very weak rule for a very long time. But EPA is now stepping up, and the proposed lead and copper rule improvements, which was proposed this past fall, includes a 10-year mandate for water systems to replace lead service lines. And that 10-year period would begin in 2027. Now, this rule's not final yet, so we don't know exactly what it will contain, but it's very clear from EPA and the White House that they expect the water system to do lead service line replacement. And because the water system needs to have a plan for replacing their lead service lines, including in low-wealth communities. And so this bill by City Council just totally abdicates the city's responsibility and puts it all on the home. And so I will now pass it back to Alia.
Thank you. The next speaker is Valerie Barron, National Policy Director and Senior Attorney at the Natural Resources Defense Council.
All right, Val. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Valerie Barron. I'm a Senior Attorney and the Policy Director for the Drinking Water Team at the Natural Resources Defense Council. Thank you to my colleagues. I agree with everything that they've said. And it is long past due that hundreds of thousands of households in New York City stop drinking their water through a lead straw. New York City was ahead of the curve when Council passed a law requiring an inventory of all of the pipe materials. But it blows my mind why then after that we would then look to a policy that would codify some of the worst drinking water policy in the country and pass the buck completely to property owners without any guarantee of assistance. In addition, not only will this bill not guarantee assistance for any New Yorkers and likely preclude many landlords from accessing public dollars, even if there is a funded program to support removing lead pipes, but it would do so at the expense of New York City accessing the largest pot of federal money ever to be allocated for lead pipe removal. The reason for that is this. EPA is right now considering regulations, and if they don't change their plan, then the New York DEP will get off the hook for coming into compliance with lead regulations. A simpler way of saying that is this. New York State, like most places, prioritizes projects that are needed to comply with federal rules when it divides up federal funds. By passing the buck to property owners, this bill would also pick the pockets of New Yorkers by denying them access to the largest pot of federal funds ever allocated for lead service line removal. That's extra unfair when you consider when and how some of these pipes got put in the ground. No lead pipes were put in the ground in New York City after 1961, and before that, many of them were actually required in order to get a tap and a hookup to the public water system. In the very first annual report of the Queens Water System in 1898, the report said this: service pipe must be of extra strong AA lead pipe. That was a requirement in order to get access to the public water system. What we have to do is we have to organize this so that we don't have hundreds of thousands of construction projects vying for attention, vying for contractors, and trying to dig up the street throughout New York City. Costs will go down and equity outcomes will be improved if the city takes responsibility and follows the lead of other jurisdictions throughout the country that have been able to successfully replace their pipe at no cost to homeowners. The state of Michigan requires that utilities pay for pipe replacements, and the state has many more pipes that are made of lead than the city of New York. Detroit, Denver, Newark, these cities have been able to do this by prioritizing these projects, being smart about the work, and centralizing the contracts. And we know that New York City can do the same thing. This bill must be taken away, but it also should be replaced with something better. And our message to City Council and to utility is we're here to help. We know what works, and we can work with you to create a program that will be successful so that all New Yorkers have water that is as clean when it gets to their house as it was when it got to their block. So we urge Council to rescind this bill and work with us on a better solution that's going to work for everybody.
Great. Clean water.
Thanks, Valerie. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you from environmental advocates, Vanessa Bacon-Turner for coming, Earth Justice, NRDC, NYLCD, thank you so much. And of course, Lady Pie. Get some water after this.